Have you ever set a boundary as a child and suddenly felt like you were the worst daughter in the world? Or maybe you said no to a family gathering and didn't answer your mom's call right away. Maybe you chose rest instead of showing up for everyone else. And suddenly your chest tightens, you start feeling guilty, your mind starts racing. Am I being selfish? What kind of daughter does that? Why do I feel like I'm doing something wrong? These are internal questions that we think. But what if that feeling isn't because you're doing something wrong? What if it's because you're breaking a role that you were trained to hold on to for your entire life? Today, we're talking about the good daughter pattern and why so many mothers still unconsciously parent from this pattern. Let's dive into today's episode. So many mothers are trying to become a regulated parent to break cycles, to change generational patterns through nervous system regulation. And we're finding, and yet still unconsciously, they are operating from that role of good daughter. The good daughter keeps the peace. They don't disappoint people. They feel responsible for other people's emotions. They stay agreeable. They don't be too much and they don't create tension. This is the good daughter role that mothers still parent from. And quite honestly, it's exhausting to parent from this good daughter role because you're still trying to fill an expectation of other people while trying to break generational patterns for your family and for your future generation lineage. It's an exhausting place to be, especially as a mother, especially as a conscious mother, breaking these cycles. That role that helped you belong in your family system growing up is something that you're realizing as you're raising children now that it's colliding with what your idea of motherhood actually is. We're going to dive into this good daughter role today and how it affects our nervous system and how it actually adds extra weight on our shoulders as mothers and what we can do instead. Regulated motherhood does require boundaries. It requires autonomy. It requires emotional honesty. It does require capacity protection. As we've talked about so many different times, capacity is key for a regulated nervous system. But the good daughter role was never trained for any of those things. The good daughter role put everyone else ahead of herself. This episode really speaks to me personally because this is something I've been healing for myself over the last several years, but especially over the last several months, and really understanding what my role now is as an adult to adult relationship with the family that I was raised in. So, this pattern actually unconsciously shows up in motherhood. The good daughter becomes often the mother who feels responsible for everybody's feelings. You're feeling responsible for your mom, your dad, your sisters, your brothers, keeping the peace at family gatherings. Maybe you struggle to say no in a situation that you really want to say no in, but instead you say yes, and then you feel like you're at your full capacity. And that's when we start having our nervous system break down and having less capacity for our children. This good daughter person overextends herself constantly, overextends what she's able to do, and she always apologizes for having needs herself. This showed up a lot for me postpartum, but does still show up for me every once in a while. And I want you to know that if you're experiencing this good daughter, people pleasing in motherhood, that you're not alone. Often when you really still embody that good daughter persona, you may feel a lot of guilt and shame when it comes to asking for help or if you need space. If you're saying, no, I don't want you to come over, but someone comes over instead, asking for help. We just talk a little bit about the postpartum experience. If you have challenges asking for help with your family, things like that. Or if you're trying to enforce a boundary, we can go about the postpartum experience again from experience for me. Hey, I don't want you coming over less than 24 hours after I have the baby. Too bad. We're going to come over anyway. Or you feel guilty if you cancel plans or don't want to see somebody in your family, or if you're choosing rest over someone else and their feelings and their emotions. This comes up constantly because it's learned in our nervous system very early on, because our nervous system learned that other people's comfort equals safety. But that's not what we are embodying as conscious parents today, right? When someone is disappointed or you perceive that someone's disappointed, your body feels like it's in danger. It's not logic. There's no logic to this, but your nervous system reacts, fix this immediately. We're in danger. We're in danger. So this is where that people-pleasing reflex often comes in from the good daughter perspective. And we often find when we're setting boundaries as a good daughter that guilt immediately increases. I feel guilty about not doing this. I feel guilty about not doing that. What's happening in this moment is your brain is not just evaluating that present moment, it's scanning your entire attachment history. So if love used to be tied to being helpful, being agreeable, being responsible, being emotionally available, then those boundaries, when you're setting a boundary, it feels like you're risking connection. Like maybe you'll be cut off, or maybe that guilt will rise and you'll feel guilty for doing that. But here's the reframe, okay? So guilt is often the body adjusting to something new, a new level of autonomy. When we feel that inner guilt or we feel just that tightness of the chest, it's often because we are adjusting to a new level of autonomy where we are changing cycles and where we are breaking generational patterns and becoming the conscious mothers that we are envisioning on being. It means essentially that your nervous system is learning a new pattern. Those feelings of guilt will come up, but it doesn't mean that the boundary is wrong at all. It means that we're learning that new pattern in our nervous systems of what safety looks like. There's often a deeper layer, emotional layer here that we can dive into. There's an internal conflict of mothers that kind of sounds like, I want to parent differently, but I don't want to hurt my parents' feelings. Does this sound like you? Because I know for a fact it sounds like me and something that I've been dealing with for a very long time. This creates a generational loyalty tension. I need to be loyal to the way I was raised. I need to be grateful for how they raised me. And yet I still want to nurture and raise my children in a different way. And that creates that tension because maybe your parents looked at it as, oh, maybe she didn't like the way we were raised. Maybe we did everything wrong. But that's not the case, right? What's happening is that you're looking at a different perspective and you want to raise your children in a different way. And what you're looking for is safety in that, not that tension of that loyal generational tension. Children are wired to protect their connection with their caregivers. It's just an innate protection wire in our bodies that happens as we are growing from childhood to adolescence to adults. So many of us have learned very early on in our childhood to minimize our own needs, keep the family stable by minimizing the needs, and avoid conflict. This could look like, I'm not going to voice my opinion because it's going to create a conflict, or I'm going to just agree with them because it's going to create a conflict. This is what we learned growing up in family systems, in traditional family systems. Or maybe we learn that we have to carry emotional responsibility for others in our family unit. And when you start parenting very consciously, what we're doing is reorganizing the system of parenting. We're reorganizing the role of parents in the children's development. And that can often feel like betrayal to our parent figures or people in our family, when actually what's happening is it's actually growth. It's growth in the family unit and it's growth in generational cycles and patterns. Breaking generational patterns can often feel like disloyalty, but it's actually evolution. And that's not easy for conscious parents to do, especially with receiving backlash with that loyalty. that we often feel that we need to provide as good daughters. Let me ask you this. Have you ever noticed like a physical sensation when you choose yourself? This could look like having a very tight chest, or your stomach drops, or anxiety, or racing thoughts, or urging to over explain why you made a decision. Okay, this sensation isn't proof that you're wrong. What's happening is that your nervous system is tapped in and saying, "This is unfamiliar. You've said no, you're going against the good daughter narrative. You're doing something different, and this is scary. This is unfamiliar to me," and often registers as unsafe. But I'd like to take this opportunity just to remind you that growth often feels unsafe first before it can feel safe, especially when it comes to our nervous system response, and especially when we are consciously making choices to do things differently as mothers and as parents. Let's shift this a little bit from the good daughter narrative to how we're modeling our autonomy for our children. Because it's like the power that we have as mothers, as conscious mothers, right? Where our children are constantly watching how we set boundaries, how we honor ourselves, honor our needs, how we regulate our guilt, and how we repair after conflict. So if they're only seeing a mother who sacrifices herself, who ignores her own needs, or who suppresses her emotions, then they learn that love equals self-abandonment. I don't know about you, but I know that I'm changing that narrative, right? That's what we're here for, to break the generational patterns and change patterns, right? But when they see you say, "I just need a minute," or "No, that doesn't work for me," you're setting boundaries. Or if you're saying, "I feel overwhelmed right now," you're putting an emotional perspective on how you're feeling. They learn something different. They learn that autonomy and connection can coexist. And this is true generational healing at its finest, which changes lineages for years and years and years to come. As you're changing these lineages and as you're breaking these cycles and changing these patterns, you're not abandoning your family of origin. Okay, this is not about going no contact. This is not about doing abandonment or not having any conversation or understanding. What you are doing is reorganizing your role so you can still love and care for your family, and you can still love and care deeply, but it means that you're no longer responsible for carrying any emotional stability of the entire system. That job was never meant for a child, and it's not meant for you now. Everyone is responsible for their own emotions and their own way of showing up. That includes your parental figures in your life, your siblings. It does not need to lie all on your shoulders. It's not meant for you. This week, if you're feeling these feelings of guilt creep up for setting a boundary or changing a way something's been done, instead of obeying that guilt immediately, just pause. And I want you to note that feeling of guilt. Name it out loud. "I'm feeling overwhelmed right now," or "I feel like I'm not being heard," or "I feel like I have to show up for everybody." Okay? In that moment, I want you to say internally, "This is guilt. This is not instruction. This is guilt." Then breathe. Breathe into that feeling of guilt and let the boundary that you've created stay. Every time you do this, your nervous system will learn that autonomy is safe. Honestly, if this episode spoke to you, you're not alone. There's so many mothers today, conscious mothers today, who are going through the exact same thing. Many mothers know intellectually that this is going on, but they still find themselves reacting, overgiving, or people pleasing, especially under stress, especially when their nervous system is at capacity. And that gap between knowing and embodiment is exactly what I help mothers bridge. If you want support with that, you can go to one of two places. I've got the Regulated Mirror GPT. This is a free tool, that helps you process those moments in real time. So you're just taking your moment, typing in what's going on, being very messy, and that it will spit out a response for you that really helps you process what's going on. And the other option I have is the capacity reset experience. And this is where we actually increase the nervous system capacity that makes regulation possible, especially in these moments of good daughter narrative. And I'm going to link both down below in the show notes so that they are easy to be accessed if you feel called to look at either one of those. If this episode spoke to you, I'd love for you to share it with another mother who still might be carrying the good daughter role while trying to raise the next generation differently. Breaking cycles, honestly, doesn't happen in isolation. It happens through conversation. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Legacy Shift podcast, and I will see you in next week's episode.